This is the Public Eye, the open mind. The station is the Bridge 99 FM, the bridge to the world, linking people in the diaspora with the home, the island, and linking us with them too. Breaking down the differences, stopping all the things that we speak of that we put in the way of integral, cooperative, easy relationships that can make us good. Huh? Yeah? Anxious that we blend our views with both the critical and the constructive. Well, indeed, all the time the critical is meant to encourage the constructive, But we're just simply not going to gripe. We're going to do more than that. Yeah. If you have a chance, wherever you are, have a look at the Gleaner today. Section C, ABC, C4. There's an article entitled Stopping the For-Profit Pandemic. Stopping the for-profit pandemic. And this is written by a man named Andres Constantin, who is an associate with the Healthy Families Initiative and a professor of law at Georgetown University in the States. He's writing generally, but it applies to Jamaica. And he's pointing out how big food and big consumer interests, in fact, pollute our lives. And he's pointing out how many companies offer a whole heap of charity, in order to be able to sanitize their products. Nowhere is this better proven than in the area of alcohol and tobacco. And I'm of course, you should know, I stated clearly, over 20, 30 years, I have been active in the movement to depress tobacco smoking, tobacco use. Yeah, and Constantine's article is saying that, according to a recent report, I'm quoting, tobacco companies use pandemic-related corporate social responsibility activities to expand access to senior government officials and repair their public image. In one audacious example, listen to this. In one audacious example, Philip Morris, that's one of the biggest cigarette manufacturing companies in the world, they donated ventilators to hospitals in Greece and Ukraine. No, hold on, no. Yeah. If you smoke, yeah, and that make you need a ventilator. So what now? The people who want you to continue to smoke and enrich themselves, they might give you the thing where you can go on. You can go on, yes, before you're dead. Help you breathe a little bit. Yes, it must, we must stop all that foolishness, And I see, what was it? Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, was it? In Jamaica now, while we are considering the new legislation that's going to put very mild regulations on the use of tobacco, they are the ones saying, it's going to depress trade. Of course it's going to depress trade, Mr. Chamber of Commerce, man. I'm surprised at you. Disappointed in you. Yes? Lloyd Distant, you wouldn't allow that. You know better. When he was the chairman or the president. Yes, it wasn't you. It was somebody else, and whose name I remember, but not recall. Yeah, you talk about you must soften up the question of advertising and stocking tobacco in gas station and other places because it may confuse trade. That's exactly what it's supposed to do about cigarettes. Tobacco can kill you. It kills millions of people a year. And you feel because the company now who make it, whether it's the local one or the foreign one or wherever it comes from, yes, whether you pay tax or you don't pay tax, you can sanitize your poison by giving ventilators and scholarship and whatnot. Minister Christopher Tufton is right when he says to the public sector, don't engage yourself and take any kind of tribute from and blood money from those whose products decrease life and cause illness and depress liberty. Yeah? And please don't tell us about personal freedom. And you don't have personal freedom to hurt yourself in a way that is going to redound to the detriment and to the cost and to the unhappiness of anybody else. Do you understand that? Yes? You cause people to despise liberal notions of human rights and freedom when you argue that way, because you turn it upside down. You make it a laughing stock. Of course I'm free to go and drink and free to go and smoke and eat up all the foods, but then when I get sick, where I go? Yes, whose services do I want? And nobody tell me you have money, you can pay for everything, you see. You can't demean human life and existence. And it's not a question of making everybody into some straight-laced true believer. And if that were the case, it would be much better off for our productivity and for our lives and for our children. But I see so many people who, because they think they are free, they adopt elements of lifestyle that can only hurt themselves at the expense of others. Yeah. So this is, on the public eye, we don't skin up, we talk it straight. You have to stop that. The government is taking far too long to pass this legislation regulating tobacco use, and the law itself is better than nothing, but it is far too liberal and lax. Not liberal, lax. It's far too lax itself. Yes, and the numbers of people in Jamaica, who, particularly young people, who are getting trapped by the addiction of tobacco, is going in the wrong direction. It's less than it used to be, but it is still not nearly moving. The people of New Zealand have done it right. They say that they will increase the age, the age where you can buy tobacco products every year, so that in a few years' time, as all young people, no young people will be able to have been exposed to this. No people. Then they intend to bring, by that means, to bring an end to tobacco use in New Zealand. Kudos to Jacinta Ardern, the straight-talking, strong, democratic, sensible Prime Minister of New Zealand. Andrew Holness, sir, most honourable, take notice, do something like that. We'll soon come back. There's more. Hi, this is the Public Eye on the Bridge. Thanks very much for staying with us. In just a few minutes, we'll join Beau-regard at Irie Jam in New York, linking the tri-state area in this massive endeavor, this epic pilgrimage to link together Jamaicans all over the world. Coming up, Professor Basil Wilson of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, Jamaican to the core, American by long heritage, telling us about situation in the U.S. and what it means for Jamaicans, for indeed for the world. In the meanwhile, I just want to finish up the remarks I was making, about people exercising their freedom in a way that prejudices everybody else. We've been talking about the tobacco, and you should really read that piece in the Gleaner today, Stopping the For-Profit Pandemic. Andres Constantine, page C, ABC, C4, All right, so you do that. But in the meanwhile, one of the plagues that really afflict Jamaica right now is that of deaths on the road. Over 400 this year, Instead of going down, it's gone in the wrong direction. And it's probably inevitable given the vast number of vehicles on the road, the prospect of more. Yeah. We are importing vehicles, spending foreign exchange, committing foreign exchange into the foreseeable future in ways that cannot be sustained. And we say, running loud them now, freedom, man free, don't you have car? Yeah, but I have a car. But if I could have public transportation, I'd be happy for that, in place of the car, because I would save some money. How about you? But we don't invest in public transportation. You don't want to tell me about the robot taxi service. Yeah, what we invest in and waste money on is fuel-based car. But then poor Andrew go to Glasgow and he speaks very responsibly and eloquently, not quite as well as Mia, but eloquently on the issue of climate change. And what we do? Is buy more oil. Yes? We spend the foreign exchange, which we're not earning, on what we cannot continue with. But that's one thing. But the second thing that bothers me, is the whole heap of what goes on the road, the accidents, the deaths, the horrible expenses, the loss of productivity, the sadness, is because there's a whole heap of people in Jamaica who drive, who never take a driving test yet, Hey, you don't believe me? I bet you, more than bet, it's more than that. On the basis of available information and statistics at my disposal, probably a third of all of the drivers on the road never do driving course, never take a test, but then buy the license and will learn behind the wheel, if they learn at all. And their habits are poor, and their danger is palpable to themselves and to everybody else. And when you go to get a taxi license, nobody asks you or tests your driving. And therefore, only for people on the road, when you see them driving with poor driving habits, they have never learned otherwise. And when they are draped up and carried to traffic court, whether it is for careless driving or dangerous driving or for any of the other things, yes, the vehicle seized, they pay money and they get back and start again. What we do not take the opportunity of testing them again. And I am mindful of the Road Safety Council and the efforts that they make. But I am surprised that they and the insurance companies of Jamaica do not insist on a proper program of driver education for everyone and of re-education for many of us who do not have the requisite the same skills as we used to. And it's not just a question whether you can reverse within 6 inches of the curb or whether you memorize some parts of the road code. Hey, even that, because there are only for people who say them know road code and them can't read. So them to know road code. Okay? What about their eyesight? What about their hearing? What about their reflex actions? These are skills that are vital to safe driving. And therefore, when you who have the authority to advise on policy and you have the authority to make policy, yes, please don't tell me about the new road traffic law, which can't get past the regulation stage in Parliament. I've been in that for 20-odd years, and you still can't do that. And it promised and it promised and it promised in 2021 it no reach. Okay, so that will help when it comes, but it's going to take some time more to come, I bet. But can't we recognize that we have to do some fundamental things? And if you don't have the skill and you aren't taught the skill and you aren't excluded if you don't show the skill, yes, then what can you expect but the carelessness and the carnage that you have on the road? Tell me I'm wrong. Let's join our friends at Irie Jam. Beau-regard, season's greetings.
Season's greetings, Mr. Thwaites. How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. How's the weather in New York City?
The weather is all right, It's not too warm today. It's not too cold,
Not too warm today, man.
We've been having some warm days,
Really?
So
Really?
it's not too cold today. It's not too warm.
Yeah,
It's just right.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. How are your listeners? What are they telling you? What kind of things are they concerned about this end of year 21?
Well, everybody's wish is to go into the new year without this COVID-19 Omicron that's affecting a lot of people. Over the holidays, we saw where a lot of people weren't able to get home because of the amount of flights that were canceled all across the U.S.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's serious, Thousands of flights, I gather.
Yes.
And it is still going on because plenty of the airline crew have been exposed or actually suffering from COVID.
Yes, that is the case. And, short staff because of the COVID-19.
Right.
Moving forward, in New York City, they have now 2 mandates have gone into effect since Monday. The one for the private sector and also the one for people ages 12 and up to do indoor dining and to enter any event facilities and things.
So you're tightening up again?
Yes, once again, they're cracking down on things. We'll
come back to that later in the public eye today. For now, we welcome Professor Basil Wilson. Prof, how are you? Season's greetings. Welcome home.
Season's greetings to you, sir.
Happy to have you again. Professor Basil Wilson, a Thwaites man of great pedigree and retired provost of John Jay College in New York City. Basil Wilson, you're the go-to man on the bridge as we try to unite Jamaicans all over. We need to survey where we are in the American political scene, and particularly as it affects Jamaicans and Caribbean people going forward. I sit here and I wring my hands. I really was so happy when Joe Biden became president and Kamala Harris vice president. But after 1 year almost in office, Basil Wilson, are they up to it or they kind of flop?
I wouldn't say they have flopped. I think there have been some accomplishment. His presidency at the outset began very much on his ability to deal with the COVID. But, COVID is not something that you can just apocalyptically deal with. You have to deal with the different variants. And that has been quite a challenge to the administration. But despite the difficulties of COVID, they passed an infrastructure bill which is unprecedented for maybe the last decade. It's a 1.2 trillion bill, and that should, in fact, go a long way to modernizing the infrastructure of the country, which is really sorely needed. And they did pass a COVID bill of 1.9 trillion, which brought a lot of funds in people's pockets and maximized the capacity to bring about vaccination. So there have been some accomplishments. There's still a great deal of accomplishments that hopefully in 22 they might be able to do successfully. One is the Voting Rights Act. I mean, we are in a serious peril in terms of what the Stockholm people call the backsliding of American democracy. And secondly, the Build Back Better bill, which will in fact make the society far more humane, expand the safety net, and become much more like a European society rather than quintessential capitalism, which is really the dominant species in American society.
Let's unpack what you've said. Important. First of all, the United States government has not been able to tame the COVID monster. Nobody could have, but the efforts that were made by the administration, are they getting any credit for it, or are they getting blamed for Omicron and everything else?
Not really. There's a sense of fatigue. I mean, people have really been beaten down by the pandemic. The extent, that it has been going on now for 2 years. People were feeling that sometime during the summer that we were past the pandemic. Then we were hit with the Delta. When we think we were getting past the Delta, then we were hit with the Omicron. So because of these difficulties, one of the things about American society, the president is the person who is the most visible. So when things are not going well, whether it is inflation, whether it is COVID, he is the person who is blamed for it.
Okay. Our co-host Beau-regard at Irie Jam in New York is telling me that mandates are likely in the city regarding recreation, dining, etc. These things are going to have a negative political connotation, won't they?
Well, de Blasio, who is the outgoing mayor, he has imposed many of these regulations based upon the increased amount of people who have come down with the virus, and it's another precautionary measure. Most of these measures are never popular, but some of them, people recognize that it is a way of becoming safe. One thing that we have seen in terms of the virus is that we're really having two tribes. One is the tribe that have been heavily vaccinated, and the tribe that refuses to take vaccination. And the people who are being hospitalized, the people who are dying, are the ones who refuse to take the vaccination.
Yeah. Well, that itself is something that has its political tentacles, because how effective is a campaign to encourage people? The anti-vax movement has taken on very strong political roots, hasn't it?
Yes, it is something that is not just peculiarity of American politics, but you find it in certain parts of Africa and certain parts of Europe.
Yeah.
That you just have this anti-scientific manifestation taking place now, which is weird.
Yeah.
You think that the vaccine, I remember when I was a child growing up, how important the polio vaccine was to us.
Of course.
And how it made such a huge difference in terms of our lives.
Yeah.
And this vaccine has made a tremendous difference in terms of our lives. But there is so much information or misinformation that is out there that there's just a tremendous resistance to really going ahead with the vaccine.
Break it down a little bit more for me now, because the infrastructure money and the quantitative easing that has taken place over the past several months. Basil Wilson, hasn't that, as helpful as it was to people who were on their knees, it seems to have fueled inflation, which is pernicious. It seems to have occasioned many deciding they're not going to go back to work, the resignation crisis. It seems to me that everywhere you turn, Makajuku.
I remember Michael Mann, they had that in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Well, there's no question that the inflation is an outgrowth of the fact that people who used to spend a lot of money on services are now spending that money on goods. And with the disruption of the supply chain, it made many of the things much more scarce. And of course, the increase in oil prices had also an effect. So we really went beyond having inflation below 2%, so that it was being characterized at almost 6%.
Right.
And so that also made, but despite the 6% in inflation, people were spending. The consumer was in fact spending money, and in fact you could see the growth in the economy. I mean, the economy was not suffering from stagflation as it was in the case of the 1970s, but we had economic growth because people were spending money, and there was a lot of money in the bank, and the earnings coming from Wall Street could not have been better. And when you looked at people 401k, there was an increase of over 20% for 2021.
Well, so can that be resurrected? Because people now are beginning to be politically suspicious that inflation is going to be excessive inflation is going to be a feature of the American economy going forward. And as I'm sure you will go on to tell me, that has implications for us in the Caribbean too, who are so derivative of American economic health,
Yes, it would. I mean, one of the things that the central bank here, the federal bank, the Federal Reserve, was saying that they thought inflation was transitory. They've abandoned that term, and that's why they've started cutting back on the quantitative easing. And we expect that in 2022 that there will be an increase in interest rates in order to tamp down on the inflation. But one of the interesting things, and that this goes back to Build Back Better, that the prognostication for the growth in the economy was just put at 3%. Because of the collapse of the talks, it was reduced to 2%. And many economists have argued that many of the provisions within the Build Back Better would in fact reduce inflation rather than increase inflation.
Like what, though? I mean, I'm trying to think what are the popular provisions in that proposed legislation that would have that effect.
For example, one of the big bills of any household is affordable housing.
Oh. And
the federal government for many, many years now cut back on being involved in construction of housing.
Yes.
There's a lot of money in the Build Back Better in order to build affordable housing.
Yes.
And in fact, there's a serious crisis in America in terms of homelessness and people who are working,
yes,
who cannot afford to pay the rent that have skyrocketed.
Yes.
You have the business of child care. And nobody would pay more than 10% for child care. That would in fact reduce would reduce the pressure on a lot of working families. And the one that is of great significance is the child tax credit, which we have different estimates. About 40 to 50% of children would in fact be lifted out of poverty if we can in fact extend the child tax credit, which in fact has now been has been exhausted. It is no longer in existence. The Build Back Better had it extended for a year. We're hoping that if there are renegotiations, it can be extended not just for a year, but for 10 years, because it is a bill that is significant in terms of reducing poverty among children. And I would predict that if you can reduce poverty among children, you will not only get better educational outcomes, but also a reduction in crime.
Sure. And just to make the point, the effects of that would be best felt among people like us, Caribbean people, immigrant people, wouldn't they? Black people.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because when you look at housing in places like the South Bronx, certain parts of Brooklyn, etc., when you look at the concentration of projects,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a wall society where you sort of warehouse people because you have nowhere else to put them.
That's a problem in the richest country of the world. Basil Wilson, hold on a second for me. Irie Jam, stay tuned. We need a break when we come back. But all of this Build Back America, is it likely to ever be legislated? What are you going to do? What are we to make of the gridlock in Congress, Professor Wilson? Soon come back. This is The Public Eye on the Bridge. Thanks for being with us on The Public Eye on the Bridge 99 FM in Jamaica and Irie Jam in the tri-state area of the United States. Talking with Professor Basil Wilson, Jamaican American, about the state of legislation, the state of politics, the state of society as we enter the new year. Prof. Wilson, is there any hope that the Build Back Better bill is going to be passed?
Well, it's a bill running that has gone through multiple gyrations. I mean, there was an impasse that had to do with the progressive caucus versus the moderate caucus in the House of Representatives. They eventually reached a rapprochement, and they passed the bill after much difficulty. So it went to the Senate, and in fact, I think there's a consensus in the Senate, except for Joe Manchin and maybe Christine Sinema. Where we are now is that the president has indicated that he is convinced that the two Joes, Joe Biden and Joe Manchin, can get together and work out a bill that will pass both houses. Now, there was an agreement on a framework of $1.8 trillion prior to the president going to the to Scotland to the Glasgow meeting.
Right.
The Manchin had always said that he would not sign off on anything until he saw the fine print in the legislation. There is some resistance where some people see the Build Back Better as making America into an entitlement society. There's tremendous resistance on the right regarding that. Some people define it as socialism. But there's no question that the expansion provisions within this would really make America a far more humane society, and in fact be in a position where investments to be made in people to such an extent that it would enhance people's lives. So I think there's a good chance in the new year, in 2022, that the two Joes will get together and in fact agree on a bill that will be supported by the Progressive Caucus within the House of Representatives.
But they don't have any choice. They don't have any choice. It's
true.
The bill is going to be what Manchin wants it to be, and nothing more, nothing less. Prof. Wilson, that's how we see it. Am I wrong?
I think he really knows. He has the handle. I mean, he is the decisive vote in all of this.
Right.
There are certain provisions
yes.
having to do with clean air energy.
Don't want that.
He's opposed.
Yeah.
That he's also very much opposed to the child tax credit based upon how it is being paid for.
Yes.
He's also said that he's in favor of taxing the rich much more than what presently exists in that bill.
I really wonder.
Is for universal pre-K. I think
Boy,
he's
that's
in favor of expanding the Affordable Care Act.
Yes,
I think
that's
he's in favor of reducing the cost of prescription drugs.
Yes.
So there are many provisions in the bill that I think the Progressive Caucus could support and that he can support. I think what is going to be critical and quite delicate is how this is paid for, because his three objections was the COVID, the inflation, and not increasing the debt. So I think if they can come to an agreement with the president as to how all this is paid for, maybe reduce some of the provisions within the bill, we can get a bill which the Democratic Party can take and run with that in the by-elections of 2022.
But clarify for me that those huge sums of money are not this year's expenditure. This is projection over what, 10 years?
And that's the tragedy, because when it started out, people were saying the bill would cost 3.5 trillion. And it sounded as if that was what it would cost per year. But this is really over a 10-year period.
Yeah.
And the Progressive Caucus compromised. It was reduced from 3.5 to 1.75, 1.8 trillion. But yet still there is still some haggling now over the CBO scoring. And whether the CBO...
Congressional Budget Office.
Yeah, the Congressional Budget Office.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of that has to be worked out in order for us to get the bill passed in both houses and signed by the president.
But wait a minute now, Professor. Now, forgive me for being so frank. Why put forward a bill unless you have the votes? What was the point of coming up with a $3 billion price ticket, or even over 10 years, and you don't have the votes and you don't canvass yourself before you put that forward? You're setting yourself up for embarrassment and defeat. How the Democrats could put themselves and all of us, sir, because we're coming to what this means if it doesn't pass. And in any event, why do that? This sounds to me like condemned political folly.
Well, as a veteran politician, Ronnie, they saw this as the president's agenda.
And what happened to it?
Their explanation.
Sure.
That the president ran on it, and they were hoping that they could convince the more conservative members of the Senate to really run with the bill.
Oh.
Now, remember, Manchin was never outright and saying he was opposed to the bill. He was always saying he was in favor of certain provisions. He thought the price tag was too high, and he was willing to bargain and to negotiate. And I think that still continues.
Well, I tell you,
all is not lost.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. That's very, very important, and optimistic to hear that. I'm sure our listeners in the tri-state area will be grateful because, sir, let's do it. This bill, and all that it embodies, the measures themselves and the spirit behind it, Basil Wilson, are emblematic, contain the substance of the liberal enterprise that we associate with the best thinking in the United States. True?
Definitely, and I think that's what modern civilization is all about. We want to make certain that people can maximize their opportunities, that they can fulfill their potential in life.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at Pell Grants, when you look at things that are being made more affordable, I mean, that becomes a big difference, especially in people who are presently struggling.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a serious problem of hunger in American society. There's a serious problem of poverty.
People can't believe that when they hear that in Jamaica, Basil, Beau-regard, people can't believe that there is a serious problem of homelessness and hunger in a society where the barrel come from.
Right, and where there's so much affluence. I mean, when you look at poverty, there's more poverty in the United States than in most European countries.
Yeah.
We now have the serious problem of homelessness. We have a serious problem of mental epidemic. I mean, there's a serious problem of people, of high rates of suicide, high rates of addiction. And I think much of it has a lot to do with the hardness of American life. I think that we make the society far more difficult and far more challenging than it really has to be.
Yeah.
So this whole notion that we will become an entitlement society, I think if we become a society based upon even the provisions of the Build Back Better, I think it will ensure that in fact we will have less crime, we will have less poverty, we will have more opportunity, and we will be able to fulfill the American dream for larger numbers of people, especially those who are now suffering from what I call immiseration.
Well,
they've been suffering from downward mobility rather than upward mobility.
Yeah. I'm a student of Charles Mills's racial contract, and I'm not sure that white America wants that to happen at all, and certainly they don't want to pay for it.
Well, it's not. I understand Charles Mills in terms of when Professor Mills identified a lot of this objection to the fact that they see black folks and brown people rising.
Yeah.
But one of the things that has never been articulated in American society is the plight of the white poor.
Yeah.
There's a husband and wife economists who teach at Princeton who have identified that in recent years, the longevity of the white working class, especially those who are poorly educated, has been falling rapidly with a high degree of addiction, high degree of suicide. So even though they're white, that don't mean they have it made.
No, but
they have been undergoing some of the difficulties of globalization and the neglect that has taken place in American society.
But they claim that the rise of Black Lives Matter and all of the so-called entitlement society is largely responsible for their deteriorating condition, and they've been captured by the Trumpists, Professor Wilson, not true?
That is a false consciousness, if we might use that they see the changes taking place, the ushering of a multi-racial democracy as something threatening to them. But it is something that is, I would say, it's not inevitable, but if you look at the demographics and the changes taking place in American society, that if we're going to preserve democracy and not become some kind of neo-fascist state, we will have to realize that the changes that are, in fact, in the making will make America into a far more wholesome society.
Well, let's take it a little bit more before we have to take a break, because this takes us to the voting rights legislation which is proposed. Here we have, let our Jamaican listeners know, multiple states of the American Union passing legislation that is going to restrict voting, especially among minorities. And the administration is trying to bring in legislation which would override those and bring back some integrity to the American democratic system. Hey, Prof. Wilson, what prospects do they have to start and before to pass? And before you answer that, let me just say this: so we really, really value the United States for its integrity, its intentionality, its support. But you can't tell us anything in Jamaica about democracy right now, Busha.
That is true. That is true. When you look at our electoral commission, when you look at, in fact, the legitimacy of our election,
yes, sir,
that has taken place once we agreed upon the electoral commission. Mm-hmm. I mean, this country now suffers from a crisis of legitimacy. And in fact, the voting rights bill that has been suggested, and in fact, it's really Joe Manchin's bill, that possibility of passing can only proceed if we abandon the filibuster or agree to a carve-out and just allow 50 votes plus one in order to enact that legislation.
Is that likely, sir?
Well, the president has come out in favor of it.
What, the carve-out?
There is the carve-out.
Uh-huh.
There are increasing number of senators like Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, who has now agreed that she would definitely support a carve-out.
She's Republican.
No, she's Democrat.
But hold on there, because the carve-out will require how many votes for that to pass?
You can get 50 votes plus one in order to bring about the carve-out.
Okay, well,
that is possible.
Then that sounds possible because if it's Manchin's bill and he's the spoiler in the Democratic caucus, presumably he would lead on this one.
But it was presented already, and he was hoping that it would become a bipartisan bill. But rather than becoming a bipartisan bill, only one Republican voted for it, and he was in fact not in favor of a carve-out. He was hoping that he could get 60 votes in all in order to overcome the filibuster, and that was not the case.
But
there's a certain amount of pressure. There's a certain amount of pressure coming from the civil rights movement and from other sectors in the society. So hopefully that pressure plus the urgency of the backsliding of American democracy will in fact come to the full realization of members of the Senate, including Manson and Sinema, and they will go along with the car vote. The president, Schumer has indicated, who is the majority leader in the Senate, that is the highest priority, and they're going to put that bill on the Senate floor when they return to the Senate after the holiday.
Ahead of the bill back?
Yes, and they're putting the bill back aside temporarily and really putting the Voting Rights Act as the number one priority.
Wow. And you see that as a possibility for passage or a reasonably plausible legislative agenda going forward in the first months of 2022, Prof. Wilson?
Like everything in American politics, it is dicey. It is not certain. There's no certainty regarding it. But I think the urgency of the situation and the fact that how states that are vulgarizing the voting process to the point where they are becoming the individuals who can determine who wins or who loses a presidential election.
That's right.
That is so dangerous that you have to have national standards and ensure that kind of skullduggery does not take place.
Me no even want to talk too much about it, Prof, because take care some of the what I call the proto-fascists in Jamaica start think that because America can do it, we can do it here. Because we're now going to make that happen, you see? Listen, let's take a short break. When we come back, I want to ask you a final question, please. If God forbid, this legislative agenda does not succeed. And in any event, Prof. Wilson, what are the prospects going forward into the elections of 2022 and beyond for the preservation of liberal democracy, of the continued defense of human rights, the support for immigrants, the dream of an America for all rather than just for the plutocrats? Professor Basil Wilson, soon come back. This is the Public Eye. Serious stuff. Prof, before time runs out on us, and thank you for your patience, tell me now, I want to avert a nightmare. If President Biden doesn't get these elements of progressive, containing legislation through, principle of the Voting Rights Act and the Build Back America, bearing in mind all the circumstances, the Democrats and history, Democrats could easily face a wipeout in the congressional elections of 2022, barely 11 months away. Once the Trumpists get that foothold in, what is the future for world democracy, for the congenial relations that exist between the United States and the Caribbean, the future for immigrants, for people of color? What are you dreaming?
Ronnie, those are critical questions. I mean, if we look at the 2020 election, despite the pandemic, we had a record turnout, and Biden was able to get 81 million voters to get rid of Trump, at least temporarily. One of the complexities of American politics is that in by-elections, the same turnout is not occurring in by-elections.
True.
You have a higher turnout in presidential elections.
Years.
And in by-elections, the electorate tends to be whiter, less amount of people voting, and older people voting. And so that's where there's a tendency for Republicans to take control of the House or to take control of the Senate.
Yeah.
The tradition in American politics is that the party that has control of the White House does poorly in the following by-elections, which will be 2022.
We're going to have to reverse that, you know, Prof. We're going to have to do what Stacey... You're going to have to reverse that. You're going to have to do what Stacey Abrams has done in Georgia, where she if it's 500,000 people, she have to talk to come out and vote to switch the Senate in last year. That you all must do.
And I think there are two things that can facilitate that.
Yeah.
The passing of the voting rights bill, the two voting rights bill, and secondly, passing Build Back Better. If that occurs, then there's a stronger possibility that the Democrats could win the House and also maintain control of the Senate.
Yeah. Boy.
And that enhances the institutionalization of liberal democracy in the United States.
That enhances the institutionalization of liberal democracy in America, which is so critical to our existence in Jamaica and the Caribbean as much as it is to yours in the United States, eh?
Because whether we like to admit it or not, America is the leader in the world when it comes to human rights.
Not under Trump, though, sir.
Not under Trump.
No.
But we have to look at Trump, hopefully that he was an aberration and that we will return to those kinds of wholesome values and lead the world in terms of human rights and liberal democracy.
Well, it's going to take a whole heap of work, and the odds are, I'm not a betting man, but the odds are against that, Prof. Wilson, right now, because Trumpism appears to be, jingoism, nativism seems to be very much abroad in the United States now, even beyond Trump. Jamaicans must have been shocked to hear the television news yesterday where Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., is telling the world that turning the other cheek, a fundamental principle of the Christian ethic and of human rights and the democratic order, turning the other cheek never did us much good, never got us anywhere. What kind of terrorist talk is that, sir?
But one of the things about folks of that ilk is that they tend to destroy themselves. When you look at the history of fascism or that kind of authoritarianism, especially functioning within what is a democratic society, it tends to burn itself out.
Oh.
And I think we see things that the Americans will, in fact, call on their better angels. We are hoping for that. We saw it in terms of the civil rights movement. We saw it in terms of the Great Society program.
But,
and I think there is some hope that will, in fact, be the case in the coming years.
Prof, I would be prepared to go with you until last January the 6th. When America was able to actually nearly have a coup, and up to now, the miscreants that caused that have not been properly prosecuted and punished, where there is still this denial of what took place and who was responsible. My heart is sinking, Prof.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a pretty picture. Listen, it takes people who will analyze it as you have. It takes a struggle that can make a difference, and you've set it out for us very clearly. Thanks so much for being with us today. Happy New Year to you, and all the best. We're looking forward to link you in the future.
And thanks for inviting me, and Happy New Year to you, Ronnie.
All the best. Professor Basil Wilson, retired provost of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. A political commentator, careful watcher of trends both in the United States and in the Caribbean and how we link. A strong voice on the public eye. Beau-regard, you're listening?
Very, very interesting conversation.
What do you think, man? You
I mean, I want to see better things happen here in the United States, but we want to also hold these politicians accountable, when they say they're going to do things that they come through. And, this Build Back Better sort of remind me of, history was one of my favorite, American history, favorite subject. It reminds me of the New Deal, with Roosevelt. And I just don't want to see our people get left out again this time, because a lot of blacks were left out during the New Deal era, when it came to housing and things of that nature. We didn't get mortgages, and white people got the jobs first, and things of that nature. Not even Social Security we were eligible for.
But tell me, Beau, you have to answer me one question. How can a black person in the United States, and certainly one of the Caribbean community, how you can think that your lot is going to be better under Trump and his kind?
No, I'm not saying whether it would be.
No,
better
I'm not
or
saying
not.
you are saying that, but plenty people do feel that, you know.
Yes, there are a lot of people who feel that way. You know,
there's-
people.
No.
Some people have, people have preferences. You know,
Hey,
you know,
brethren, preferences that when
people might
when
hear some policies that they're saying, okay, I like this policy, I like what he's saying or she's saying.
Yeah.
You know, things
Well,
of
you know,
that
look
nature.
on the whole thing. This is a man who look on your country of origin, sir, and call it a S-hole country.
I understand that, but I'm not saying I'm for Trump. I'm just saying, you know, people, like you said, people are for him, so they have their reasons, you know, and, you know, sometimes the policies that
But them
people
don't
might
know,
hear.
them don't know what going to lick them, you know.
Because first people used to go for just the parties.
Yeah.
Now people are actually trying to listen to the policies,
Right.
you know, and a lot of people don't even know that black people were, you know, all for the Republican Party before 1936, before Roosevelt and his days.
Yeah.
You know, it was the New Deal that brought over a lot of black people from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party because they weren't being, you know, given anything from the Republican Party. So they came over with the things that the New Deal were offering, so they started to vote Democrat.
Well, what do you see as mood of the Caribbean people in New York? What is the vibe you're getting on Irie Jam about this stuff? Because you can't. There are no political sidelines to sit on when your future and that of your children is at stake, you know.
True indeed. Well, you know, in terms of Caribbean folks, we always want the best. It's all about coming here and, you know, fulfilling that dream and a better life. So, you know, a lot of people are educating themselves, one thing, you know, through the media and through, you know, there's more information that's readily available to them. You know, people can educate themselves and then can look into things and say, well, this is what I want for myself, this is what I want for my kids, so this is what I'm going to do.
I'm just begging you all take it serious. You see, don't make anybody take step with you because and talk to your fellow Caribbean people, and it's a time now for very careful reflection and not for selfishness, but to look for the good of the common good of the community. That has to be there, and it seems to me the political choices that emerge from that consideration ought to be abundantly clear. Yeah, always a good thing to chat with you and have you listen in and participate with us, Beau.
You too, sir.
Happy New Year. We look forward to We'll and Come Again in 2022, eh?
Looking forward to it. You have a wonderful New Year.
Yeah, man.
All
And
right.
greetings and much love to the audience of Irie Jam and all of us in the diaspora.
Bless.
Take care. Good.
All right.
And that's how we bring Public Eye to a close for 2021. Thanks to our guests, former Press Association President Desmond Richards and Professor Basil Wilson in New York. Thanks to all the Public Eye, Open Mind, Bridge Nation callers and listeners for tuning in on the Bridge 99 FM and Irie Jam Radio. Just no difference between us, you know. Same Sankey for both of us, here and abroad. Sign for the future. Hope for 2022. And all of those tuning in on our live stream, www.thebridge99fm.com. Thanks to producer LaFane Wigan, technical operator Richie Rainford, and the entire production team here at the Bridge 99 FM and the Irie Jam family in New York. To the world.